Rome, headquarters of the most powerful religious organization in history. It all started 1,700 years ago when a pagan Roman emperor, Constantine, had a vision, converted, and welcomed Christianity into his mighty empire.
It marks the beginning of a relationship between politics and religion. Now, Christianity could frame itself as a triumphalist religion.
This is the story of how Constantine's change of heart converted the church from an underground and small-scale movement to the global superpower of today, with over 2 billion believers.
It helped to organize even further this church and make its mission to evangelize the world more effective.
Constantine's conversion changed Christianity forever. It's given us glorious art, music, architecture, and helped to shape the Bible itself. But did it distort the original teachings of Jesus of Nazareth?
I think this is one of the most tragic periods for Christianity, if not tragic. It completely changes the meaning of Christianity.
The concept of a just war and bishops in Parliament are just two present-day legacies of Constantine's conversion. Before Constantine, the Roman Empire had slaughtered Christians for entertainment. Yet Constantine did a U-turn, deciding that Christ, executed by Rome as a common criminal, was in fact the Son of God. I am a former politician and a former Christian. And what I want to know is why Constantine, that master of the political arts and leader of a pagan realm, chose to give his thumbs up to Christianity, and what were the consequences of his conversion for the Roman Empire and for the Christian faith. Before Constantine's conversion, Christianity was a minority in the wilderness, without a prayer of sharing power. Yet in the years after Jesus died in far-off Jerusalem, his powerful message had spread even to remote parts of Rome's vast empire, such as Cappadocia in modern Turkey, a heartland of early Christianity. The area of Cappadocia is rich in Christian myths of martyrs and so on. Do you think there's a particular reason for that?
It probably comes together with the landscape. It's very powerful and at the same time a secluded environment framed by mountains. So they started, first of all, gathering and worshipping in private houses. These were called domus ecclesiae.
Christianity was a renegade sect that had broken away from the ancient religion of Judaism. Hidden away in houses, caves, and catacombs, its early followers conducted rituals ranging from ecstatic experiences to silent vigils. Within the first 200 or 300 years of Christianity, what different sects grew up?
Oh, a number of them. And one of them is known as the Arians. They developed largely in Northern Africa and they spread into this part of the world. Extreme sects like stylites, monks living on columns, holy fools traveling around villages, talking about Christianity in ways that were not conformed with the Gospels.
The word was carried more authoritatively by Christianity's holiest saints.
From Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to the strangers scattered throughout Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia.
The first letter of St. Peter was addressed to the churches of Asia Minor, urging them to endure sporadic local persecution in the assurance that their hour would come.
The trial of your faith is more precious than gold.
It suits politicians for the masses to be religious, in moderation at least. If the citizens believe that there's a god or gods who see everything that they do and hand out penalty points for bad behavior, then they'll conform. But religious extremism, that's something different altogether. If people reject the authority of their rulers when it clashes with the laws of their God, there'll be trouble. For the Romans, the Christians were becoming a real pain. In the 21st century, states feel threatened by those whose eyes are fixed on heaven and who take their orders only from an authority that is not of this world. In the 1st century, Paul of Tarsus travelled through Asia Minor with an equally revolutionary message: that Jesus Christ was the promised Messiah come to save all mankind. I've come to this cave high above the ancient city of Ephesus, where clearly the archaeologists and restorers are busy with their work in search of St. Paul the Apostle, miraculously preserved, the earliest discovered mural of him. And the Bible tells us that he came to Ephesus on a missionary visit in AD 52. And supposedly slept in this cave. On the road to Damascus, Paul had a vision of Jesus and dedicated the rest of his life to converting others around the known world, with the constant risk of being martyred for his evangelizing work. The pagan practices that St. Paul discovered in the city below outraged him. Ephesus was a religious epicenter in the pagan world. Travelers came to worship at the temples of Artemis and of Nike.
Didn't you call her Nike? You know, we like to make things English.
Yes, that Nike, when she was just the goddess of victory, and to offer the gods animal sacrifices. How would they find out what the gods and goddesses wanted?
Priests and priestesses used to tell them what they wanted. So each god or goddesses had certain functions, certain duties. So through this, they knew of what the gods or goddesses wanted from them.
And how did the priests seek the guidance of the gods and goddesses?
Looking at the liver of the victims sacrificed on the altar outside the temple.
Paul denounced sacrifices. Jesus' sacrifice redeemed all humanity. He condemned the multiplicity of gods. For him, there was only one God. Give me another prize. 45. He berated the idol sellers at the temple. As a consequence, Christians posed a threat to imperial interests.
Most of the Roman temples were functioning as banks. So when Christians told their followers not to go to temples, not to sacrifice animals there, it was a radical drop, drastic drop of their income for the imperial cult.
And business is business.
Business is business, yes.
In the Roman world, there was no distinction between religion and politics. Emperors sought divine instructions and became gods themselves. So the idea of a single god challenged the state. Some emperors saw Christianity as a treason punishable by death. Here in Aphrodisias, a small city dedicated to the goddess of love, is a superbly preserved Roman stadium. In places like this, traitors were dealt with sadistically.
By the time you get to the mid-3rd century, some emperors systematically decided that Christians either had to sacrifice or they had to be excluded. By the time you get to the late 3rd century, Diocletian and the age of persecutions into the early 4th centuries, then we can in fact talk of empire-wide persecutions against Christians.
In stadia like this, families would gather to cheer on the gladiators. And for lunchtime entertainment, they might set a Christian ablaze or feed him to the wild beasts. It might seem a one-sided struggle, the mighty empire with its armies and its jails and its arenas of death pitted against a few pacifist Christians. But faced with impending slaughter, the Christians followed the example of Jesus and welcomed death. They deployed against the state that most powerful of political weapons, martyrdom.
I think there's very clear evidence that as these huge waves of persecution are unleashed, you get a large growth in the Christian population. They'll probably be seen by the aristocracy, the powers that be in their particular area. That is the chance where they have to demonstrate their Christianity as they die in the arena. They are dying well.
The willingness to die for faith won admiration amongst the Roman elite. Amongst the converts to Christianity was Constantine's mother. Constantine's mother was a Christian.
As a matter of fact, she was. And her name was Helena. And we have a representation of her here in this church. She is standing next to Constantine. And what unites them is a cross. She traveled as far as Jerusalem. And she was one of the first pilgrims.
Helena's faith led her to build the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, one of Christianity's holiest sites. Persecution strengthens your enemies. Martyrdom attracts new recruits. Christianity spread. Its teachings touched the conscience of the most powerful man on earth. Invited in from the cold, Christianity was to be enthroned as a religious and political force without compare. Despite persecution, or because of it, the Christian population reached near 10% of the Roman Empire by the beginning of the 4th century. With an effective structure of bishops and clergy spread throughout the empire, the church found recruits even within the Roman legions. In 306 AD, in far-off Britain, the Roman army declared a new emperor, Constantine. These fragments are part of a huge statue of him commissioned during his lifetime. Egotistical? Yes, but his impact on our history and on our modern world is indeed colossal.
Without Constantine, history would have been much different. That much we do know.
Had Constantine not ordered the 50 copies of the Gospel, we wouldn't have had the Gutenberg Bible rolling off the printing press in the 15th century.
Under Constantine, Christianity goes from being something which opposes the empire to being part of the empire, and then indeed you have to be a Christian in order to be a part of the empire at all.
Because of the enormity of the empire, it had 4 co-rulers. Constantine governed Britain, Gaul, and Spain. Maxentius, co-emperor in Rome,